Should be live here. Alrighty. Hello, everybody. My name is John Graves. Welcome to this month's ArtistWorks Live. I'm going to introduce our guest here in just a minute, but first, I'm going to remind you guys, the audience, that these questions today are coming solely from you. So get them coming in now. I saw we already have a few that are in. So feel free to include your student name, and we're going to be giving away a small prize at the end. All right, my guest today has recorded and performed with everybody from Garth Brooks, Vince Gill, Dolly Parton, Sam Bush, Tim O'Brien, Earl Scruggs, Alison Krauss. That's just to name a few. He's been teaching here country guitar here at ArtistWorks since October of 2015. Time flies. Finishing up a coast-to-coast tour with John Oates right now. His new record, Life After Dark, comes out on March 9th. Ladies and gentlemen, Guthrie Trapp. Hey, Guthrie, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Doing fantastic. You're in Nashville right now, right?
I am. Yeah, I'm in Nashville. It's another rainy day here in Nashville in February. I would kill to be on the West Coast with you guys in beautiful Napa.
Yeah, it looks pretty good out there right now. We had some rain over the weekend.
Yeah.
Hey, so you are not a couple days break from the road then?
Yeah, I got about a 10-day break. The biggest gap that I have in the tour is right now, and I'm kind of glad because I can get caught back up on my video exchanges and get back into all this, catch up, do some laundry, all the things that get that you kind of get tunnel vision when you get out on the road because it's just a weird thing. You're doing what you need to be doing. You're playing music, but you're also having a great time. You're going from hotel to hotel, city to city, and you kind of get caught up in that world and kind of forget about all the things that you're worried about back at home,
Yeah.
So now it's back to reality.
He mentioned ArtistWorks video exchanges before laundry. Now that's priorities right there.
Right, exactly.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We only have so much time with you, so I'm just going to dive into some of these questions.
Yeah.
And just another reminder to everyone joining us. Thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciate the participation. These are so much fun to do every month. Just keep those questions rolling in. I don't have anything pre-written. I'm just going to let you guys kind of run the show, and I'm just going to read these off. So to start, Guthrie, Nashville has such an elite, it's such an elite music capital. Can you tell us a little bit about how you went about becoming such a huge part of that scene? How'd you get started there?
Well, I was lucky to move here when I was about 22 years old, and I wish I would have moved here sooner. I should have moved here when I was 18, but I moved here at about 22, and at that time, Nashville's grown so much since then. I couldn't imagine moving here now and trying to do what I did back then. But man, it's just grown so much, and there's so much talent here. But yeah, even back then, it was a huge talent pool, and still, you still had to be really good. I mean, this is the kind of town where the proof is in the pudding. You could talk to somebody all day long and tell them how great you are and all that, but if if they don't see you or hear you play, then it's kind of like blowing smoke. So you have to get out and play. So I went down and talked to Don Kelly at Roberts when I knew that was like the best band playing live in town on Broadway, doing that kind of club gig thing. And I went down and talked to him, and I said, hey, look, if you ever need a sub for this gig, I just moved to town and I'd love to fill in for you. And he never let me sit in. And then one day a mutual friend met us on the sidewalk. One night I was talking to Don. He walked up and he goes, hey man, you ought to let this guy sit in sometime. Don let me sit in. He gave me the gig. I played with those guys for 4 years at Roberts, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night for 4 hours a night. So I got a crash course in playing real country music in downtown Nashville, which was amazing. A lot of stuff stemmed from that gig. It kind of gave me street cred as like a gunslinger in town immediately. And then, different opportunities kind of stemmed from that. Patti Loveless gig, and I played on a bunch of her records for years. And then the Jerry Douglas gig came out of that, and knowing Sam Bush and all these different guys, just the network just grew and kept growing, and it still is, So it's a great town, and just there's a lot of opportunities here, and there's no ceiling, that's one of the beauties of Nashville is it's kind of a smallish town, but the ceiling for the music business is you can go as far as you want with your career here and not have to leave. So it's pretty cool, and it's inspiring,
Yeah, that's great. Was there ever Was there ever a backup plan, or did you just always know you were going to be a professional musician?
Yeah, I've never had a backup plan and still don't. You know, there
Well, I
isn't
don't think you need one at this
a
point.
backup plan.
Maybe you can become an electrician or something. You know?
My backup plan is moving back to being with my parents, I guess. I don't know. That's about the only one I've got.
Hey, so this question is from our friend Barefoot Kenny. He's asking about some of your licks. He says, do you use licks that are usually found on pedal steel, or do you invent your own according to the style of country music you're playing, whether it's country or swing or western?
Yeah, both and all of those. And by the way, I love that name, Barefoot. What was the last part?
Barefoot Kenny.
Barefoot Kenny, man. I got to meet this guy. So anyway, you know, yeah, I mean, yeah, we all have our standard vocabulary of pedal steel guitar licks that you learn when you're getting that stuff under your belt. But then as your vocabulary on the guitar and your comfort level of the instrument increases, then your own licks start coming out, and you start just you kind of know when you can bend and when it's going to work and when it's not. Like there's a lot of things, like, you know, kind of like, let's get in like the key of A, like your standard kind of steel bends are like, you know, there's some stuff like that. You know, those are pretty standard, like this. But then as you get to where you're getting a little bit more comfortable on the guitar, I'll do stuff like this. You can do these little bends like. You can kind of bend all over the place, but yeah, you're right. You know, you have your kind of stock licks, and then you just keep building on that, like kind of like anything else you would with playing the guitar. You know, as your vocabulary increases and your knowledge of the fingerboard, then yeah, your freedom becomes more relevant. You know.
Yeah, so that pedal steel kind of effect that you're emulating there, I know you have a lot of lessons on that at the school. But for some of our other guitar players that are watching from other schools, what exactly are you doing? If you slow that down, are those just basically like double stops where you're kind of bending one of the strings up a half step or a full step? Or
yeah, so a lot of these, like the more simple ones, like let's go to the key of E for a minute. So like a pretty simple one would be like a two, would be, you know, using two strings, but just bending one of them like a. So I'm really essentially I'm going, which is out of the chord shape. So I'm really bending I'm bending up to here. So that would be without bending, and this would be with bending. So I'm bending up to an actual note that I want to hit. That's a full step bend. So. So that would be a pretty simple bend. And then the more complex bend would be, and they're all out of the chord shapes. So I'm bending up to basically, like if I was going to do this, I'm thinking of this chord shape, but I'm also bending up to this chord shape. So I'm bending from up to there. So. So you could play that lick without bending. It would sound like this. Right out of those two chord shapes. But when you bend up and then back down.
Yeah.
So that would be more complex. You're using three strings there. You're using your E string, your B string, and then your G string. But if you can visualize the chords, you're literally you're bending right up to that E major chord, the third of E, which is that, G sharp. So
And it probably takes a lot of practice to be able to keep that E and B string right where they're at, and then bend that other one up the full step perfectly.
Yeah, and I'm holding that down. I'm holding that E and B string on the 12th fret down with my little finger, and then I'm using supportive bending technique, which is really the only way to do it. Because if you try doing this without these two fingers reinforcing it, it would be very hard, and it's out of control. So what I do is whatever note I'm bending, if I'm bending with my ring finger, then my middle finger and first finger are on the two frets behind it, and they're giving it the power to bend up.
Right.
You know, so that's crucial. It's almost impossible to do it without doing that. So if you can see there, that's what I'm doing. I'm using these. If you ever see anybody or ever try to bend with just one finger, it's impossible to do. You have to have those other fingers reinforcing it just to get that power and control. That's always, it kind of happens naturally now, but at least one or two fingers supporting that, you know.
Yeah.
It just helps it keeping it from being out of control.
Yeah. So what are some of the qualities you think tonally that give it those bends, that country kind of sound, as opposed to like just some bluesy bends?
Well, yeah, the tone, you know, being on the back pickup, having a clear, clean tone, a country, you know, quote unquote kind of country sound, you know, and a lot of it has to do with where you're playing with your right hand. Like, you know, if I'm going to do that lick, I'm not going to be up here. I'm going to get back down here by the bridge. It gives you a tighter tone, but then also it just depends on, of course, all this stuff comes down to the context of the song you're playing. So that has a lot to do with it. I mean, if I'm playing a blues song, a lot of times I'll end up doing I'll do some kind of double stop country bends, but if it's in a blues song, it works, and vice versa. Country music is very bluesy, like a lot of that kind of stuff like this, you know. So it kind of just depends on the attitude you give it. Playing back by the bridge gives it a little bit more of kind of a honky tonk sound, you know, a little more aggressive, but it's just the attitude and the feel of it. If I was going to play the blues with this setup, I'd probably be on my front pickup, getting a little bit more of a fat tone. So that would be like some blues licks. And then if I was on the back pickup, immediately it would start sounding a little more country. So, and also mixing in with country, you're mixing in a little bit more of the major third sound in with the blues scale. You're kind of going in between the major pentatonic and minor pentatonic a little bit more than you would in the blues, probably. Right. So that kind of separates those two a little bit. Yeah.
That's great. We could go on about that all day, but we got to move on. But just a note to any of the students out there that want to learn more about that. There's you have a whole set of lessons on this type of thing at your school, right? Those kind of pedal steel type licks.
Right. Yeah. Totally. And then of course, you know, and then with the video exchanges, it's awesome because anybody that wants to take one of those lessons and really dive in deep with it, I mean, we can go back and forth forever. So.
Nice. Okay, so this one's from Daniel Morris. It says, hello, Guthrie. Could you describe the difference or connection between country, bluegrass, and blues music?
Yeah, boy, that's an in-depth question.
That's a big question. If I'm reading into it, maybe what he's after is if you're going to play country versus bluegrass or blues, maybe like how the different ways you kind of approach those certain styles, which you got into that a little bit just now, tones and whatnot.
Yeah, and basically kind of what I said a second ago, but I'll elaborate on it a little bit more. It really, you know, the more I think about music and playing and styles and tones and feels and everything, it really, at the end of the day, and I'm learning this more and more myself, how important this is, and it really it is. It all comes down to the song you're playing. It's all about songs. So, you know, if you're playing a bluegrass 2-beat kind of up-tempo feel, then that's going to be the appropriate thing, and that's my instincts, is to go to that kind of playing. If it's a country Waylon Jennings style or Merle Haggard kind of groove that's a little slower, maybe a little greasier, a little funkier, then that's the kind of style that I'm going to gravitate towards to play on. If it's a bluesy song, if we're playing The Thrill Is Gone by B.B. King, that's not going to be appropriate to play bluegrass or country or jazz or anything. You're going to go and you're going to play what's appropriate for that song. Right. So, I mean, if you really want to get down to the nuts and bolts of it, that's the answer. But if you want to talk about how those genres are related, first of all, those are 3 super rootsy foundation level genres of music from this country. I mean, bluegrass, country music, and blues. First of all, everything came from the blues. And then the bluegrass kind of stuff came from Irish music and the meetings of all this stuff in America. So, you know, once you get into that, you know, that's a whole other conversation. But, you know, if I'm going to play a bluegrass feel, it's going to be more, it's going to be down, up picking, called flat picking. I'm not going to be playing with my fingers as much if I was playing like bluegrass acoustic guitar like Brian Sutton, or if I was playing, you know, something more single note oriented on my electric guitar. It's going to be more like, you know, kind of fiddle tune sounding stuff like, you know, something like that, versus the country thing is going to be a little bit more wiry and string bending, you know. And then the blues, like I did earlier, is going to be more like a completely different attitude, where I'm playing probably with a little some reverb and kind of getting back by the bridge a little bit to get that kind of T-Bone Walker tone, you know. So it just depends on, it really comes down to the song you're playing for that. As far as, you know, there's kind of 2 different answers there, like the history of the music and the actual playing of those styles, and what you would play on what specific song. So,
right. Well, there's a lot of questions and comments coming in about the new record.
Yeah, let's get it.
And I imagine it features a little bit of all those styles and more that we just discussed. Yeah,
this I'll try to describe this as quick as I can, because I know we got to move on to some different stuff. But this record basically is all the things I didn't get to do on my first record. So I played some mandolin, I played some acoustic guitar. There's a bunch of vocal guests on this record. I still got to do the kind of trio and quartet kind of fusion, you know, fusion of all my influences, kind of original stuff. Did some straight up country shuffles on there with Vince Gill, Charlie Worsham, and Paul Franklin. Jeff Coffin's playing saxophone on some of the more wild, like instrumental original stuff. Some great singers doing some covers of some records I used to listen to when I was a kid, Paul Butterfield. So it's basically a nod to all my influences, and you know, I wanted to have some great singers that I've been working with on there as well. So I'm proud of the record. You know, I take music seriously, but I also don't think it needs to be overthought. So I just find songs I want to play, come up with a couple originals, call the guys I know will play great on them, and we go in and record. Right. And you know, whatever, if a tune or two is not happening, then we just, you know, scrap it and put the ones on there that turned out good. You know,
I mean, it'd be hard to scrap a tune though.
Yeah, it's hard to scrap them, but you know, sometimes you got to let 1 or 2 go. But for this record, I think we pretty much kept everything, and you know, as long as the instrumental ideas are strong enough to where it's actually a song, right, then we're good, you know.
Right. So this Ed, his account name's AW Guitar 2017. He says, "Love the new CD. Any plans to do some shows that feature songs off both of your CDs?" Yeah,
there's some stuff in the works. I haven't really toured ever under my own name, rather than just doing certain specific gigs, like we've done some guitar festivals and private events and stuff like that. But as far as an actual tour, I've never done one. We want to get that going in the next year or two for sure. But I make my living doing all this other stuff, so I've really got to be careful about doing, scheduling, doing my own gigs, because I'm just not going to make that much money doing it. So there's that. But there will be some gigs. We're going to do a Music City Roots show here in Nashville. It'll probably be the whole night of just my record release with the guests and stuff. So depending on where you're at, there's some festivals in East Tennessee that we're working on getting some of those. And I want to do some regional touring to start for sure. But that's in the works for sure.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So another question about the new record, which we might as well talk about since it's just days away from coming out.
Yeah.
What was your favorite moment of making the new record? It's fantastic work, by the way. That's from Ralph Johns.
Thank you. I don't think there was one moment. The whole process is a joy, because basically once you get into the studio and the guys are showing up and you're cutting the songs, after you've done all the scheduling and all the work that it takes to get to that point, once the guys are in the room and you're playing the songs, I mean, all those tracks were a blast to make, because all those guys are my close friends. They all played their asses off on it. And those are, I would say of the whole record making process, of course, the tracking days are the most exciting. And then, just seeing this stuff come together and how it sounds, and working in the Sound Emporium, which is a great studio. And then the overdubs, which were Paul Franklin overdub, Vince Gill overdub, Sam Bush overdub, Stuart Duncan, Jeff Taylor from the Time Jumpers, and Jeff Coffin, Charlie Worsham as well. These were all guys that overdubbed because of scheduling. And we did that at my studio in Berry Hill, and having those guys come in and just work with them one-on-one and overdub after I already kind of played everything. I could sit back and kind of put my producer hat on a little bit. That's a blast too, because the pressure's off of me. I can work with them, listen to what they're doing, and
that's great.
And see that kind of all come together too. So those are really fun times, recording. And of course, once the day's over and we get the bourbon out and have a couple little drinks and listen to some tracks back, and the pressure's off from playing, and it's kind of relaxing, that's always fun too. So yeah.
That's great that you still got that personal one-on-one kind of connection with them during the overdubs, probably more so than you would have if you tried to have everyone in the studio at once. It just would have been kind of stressful and chaotic. And it's a little crazy, because you do. I mean, some of those days at Sound Emporium, especially when we did Nobody's Fault But Mine, we had, there was 4, 5, 6, 7. There was 5 or 6 singers alone there, and the band and the engineer, and we had some guests come in to hang out. And by the time you do that, there's a lot of people. It's almost like a small party, and then you're right. So once you don't get the one-on-one time that you do in an overdub situation, which is fun, and they can take more time to kind of do different and stuff. So the overdubs can lose their magic when it's like, oh, so-and-so recorded his part from North Carolina, and then this guy was out in California, but you still got to be in there in the room with them and kind of talk the part out with them and watch them record it. So that's great.
Yes. So other than those few overdubs, everything else is live. We recorded everything else live. So it still maintains that feel.
Nice. So this is from Stu Budd, who's a Keith Wyatt student. He says, I really love country music solos. I'm studying blues, but really love country music solos. What are your thoughts on the interplay between country and blues music? So we touched on this already a little bit, but maybe you want to go into kind of when those worlds start to collide. And
I would just say that they're very related, and I think blues might transfer over into country more than country transfers over into blues. Just because when I think of blues, I think of just bluesy, the feel of it. So even if I'm playing something like Working Man Blues or something, where I'm playing, if the groove is something like that, to me that's still bluesy, to where you're going to use the flat 7 and the minor third every once in a while, more than just if it's a straight up country song where you're playing the major pentatonic a lot. So, you know, even if it's a country groove like that, so that was country-esque licks, but there's a lot of blues feel in there because of the using the pentatonics and the blues pentatonic and the flat seven and all that. So to me, they're very related and can intertwine perfectly with each other, you know?
Yeah, so if he was going to, you know, if this Stu Bud was, after studying with Keith for a while, if he was going to kind of come over to your neck of the woods and get into country, where do you think a good starting point for him would be? Just maybe just depending on his skill level and just kind of dive in there.
Yeah, and I would say if you just jumped and wanted to come study with me for a minute, I would probably tell you to play all the same stuff, except we would approach it and with the attitude of country, which will be your, you know, playing on the Telecaster, using your back pickup, playing a little bit more with your hybrid style to get that attack, you know, a couple licks and stuff here and there. But basically, it's not like you're relearning the guitar. It's just the approach.
Right.
Yeah.
So Joe Adams, now for something completely different. He says, "What was it like working with Dolly?"
You know what? It was great. She was fantastic. We did a ASCAP Music Awards show out at one of these venues. I don't even remember where we were. It might have been like a ballroom at one of the big hotels or something. And we were backing up a bunch of people. I backed up like Lyle Lovett that night and a bunch of songwriters and a bunch of different people. And then Dolly came out to do sound check. She walked out with a wireless microphone, came up and shook all of our hands, told us thanks, and said we sounded great. And she sang the song and walked off the stage, said, "See ya." And then we didn't see her again till that night. She came out, sang the song, nodded to all of us, walked off stage, and she was gone.
Yeah. Professional.
She's a pro. She's Dolly Parton. But the experience I had with her was very positive. She thanked all of us and made sure she acknowledged everybody in the band, which not every superstar has to do that. So
right, yeah, I've heard a lot of lovely things about her. Very gracious and professional. Okay, so let's see. So Ralph Johns asks, and I'm not sure I understand this question, so maybe hopefully you do. He says, "Do you own any B-Bender equipped guitars? They're very hard to come by in the UK."
Yeah, you know, I don't own any B-Bender guitars. I never have, and I'm not a huge fan of B-Benders. I love the playing and the way other people make them sound. I can't wrap my fingers around using a B-Bender because every time it's very uncomfortable because every time I go to bend naturally, the B-Bender kind of moves and it's just uncomfortable for me. So I do all the string bending with my fingers, but you know,
just real quick, just to clarify, the B-Bender, that's like a little mechanism that you can use to kind of emulate that pedal steel sound, right?
Yeah, and it's very exact. I mean, it bends right in tune perfectly. And you, a lot of times there'll be a mechanism right here on the strap button to where it's called a pull bender, and you engage it by just pulling down with your strap, and it bends it for you, so you can do that. Right. And there's also palm benders and some different things, but I've never been comfortable using a B-Bender, but I love the way they sound, and if you can find one and you really love the way that sounds, then I'd say get one and start messing around with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Let's see here. So from Casey says, was there something in particular in your learning progression that connected all the dots and made the light bulb go off for you? Kind of a moment we all kind of hoped for.
yeah, and you know, I don't know any music theory or anything like that. I don't read music. I play by ear and by feel, which a lot of my favorite players do. But you know, the thing that really changed my life was, and I tell all my students this, and they'll know if they're listening in, but the importance of knowing your chord shapes, the different inversions of your chord shapes up the neck, and knowing getting familiar with the scales and arpeggios of those chords up the neck, and really visualizing it. You know, like I don't really ever play this giant bar chord. but I know all the notes that are key to that chord and what I can do around there. And seeing, once you get these big shapes under your belt and you can really visualize them, then you take the triads of those chords and you start seeing how when you're playing lead guitar, you know, if I was to do this, I can see exactly what chord shape that's coming from. You know, so when you're doing stuff, you know, I can see what chords, you know, exactly what chords those are coming from. So the importance of the chord shapes and the information around those chord shapes, what outlines the chords, scales, arpeggios, that is one of the biggest things that changed my life on the guitar, because I started seeing how everything connects, and the mystery got less and less, right?
Right. Oh, that's very cool. So what would a quick example of that be? Let's say you were working in like a major, like D major, C major, A major, just like that, a chord progression like that. And you're saying you can take those shapes and learn them and simplify them almost as if they're their own scales, and kind of solo over them that way.
Yeah, and depending on what that chord progression sounds like, you know, let's see. So if I was playing that, so I'm playing all that out of those chord shapes. I'm going right to the chord shape and playing something like let's see. Whatever it is, you're just going right to that chord and playing something out of that chord. It's all about knowing how to resolve and the phrasing of it, you know. So the more you learn on the guitar, the more comfortable you get, the more you're able to be free with coming up with those licks that time out perfectly for those chord changes and what those rhythms are.
Right. Oh, that's great. Mark Smith asks, what gauge strings for all that bending?
On every guitar I own, I use 10 through 46 Diodarios. I have been since I was 13 years old. Yeah. So if you go too light, things can get a little wiry. And if you go too heavy, they're too thick sounding for this style, and then they're hard to bend, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So Scott Catcher is asking if there's any alternate tunings that you mess with or even recommend for different styles.
You know, for most everything I do, I'm in standard tuning, you know, A440, you know, straight guitar tuning. But like for a lot of slide stuff, if I'm doing some slide stuff in the studio, like on my National Resophonic guitar or some of my like Tyscos that are set up with flat wounds and stuff, I'll tune those in depending on what the song is and what key the singer's singing in. I'll tune to like open D, open G, maybe open E, but not as much. I really like open G and open D. D is in dog.
Right. So D, open D is that's dadgad, or is dadgad and D and open D different?
I think dadgad is pretty much open D. Yeah.
Okay.
So it would be D-A-D, and then
G-A-D.
And then it would be, well, dadgad. So open D would be D, A, D, F sharp, and then A and D.
Oh, okay. So it's a little different.
So dad is a little bit more of a suspended sound.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's what I like. And of course, there's a million open tunings you can check out online. But those are the ones that are kind of the most, you know, I have those under my fingers enough to be able to use do them on a session or something, you know.
Yeah.
But they are fun, you know.
Right. Yeah. Pick and Grin asks, do you ever wish you had a whammy bar on your Telecaster?
Never. No.
Well, before we went live, you had a Strat you were playing on, and I didn't notice you using the whammy bar on that. So
I was just gonna say I've got that Strat. I just bought a pretty nice Strat from the guy that makes them named Dan Strain here. He does the Telecasters, and I just got this Strat yesterday, and I do love the tremolo on a Strat for sessions. Man, that tremolo is just so nice. But one of the things I love about the Telecaster is the fact that it's a really solid guitar. There's not many moving parts at all. And that's why I like the 335 also. No moving parts. I mean, you start getting into tremolos and Bigsby's and stuff like that, and there's not as many moving parts. And I'll tell you the other reason why I would never have a Bigsby or any kind of vibrato on my Telecaster is because when you do multi-string bends, the bridge goes down and it goes out of tune.
right.
So to play country, you got to have a straight Telecaster with no wang bar on it.
Makes sense. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. Snowden is asking, any chance?
I know what Snowden's asking. When are you going to respond to my video exchange?
No, he's saying, any chance of you playing in the upper Midwest anytime soon? Twin Cities, Des Moines, perhaps?
Possibly, yeah. It just depends on what happens with the rest of this Oats tour. You know, we are going to hit some different cities that we missed, and hopefully come to Minneapolis or something, you know?
No Des Moines, huh?
I don't think so. That's not on the schedule, but you never know.
Alrighty, let's see. I'm just going to keep firing through these. Thanks so much, everybody, for your participation. Lots of good stuff here. So, Ruben Roy, and I love this. Let's talk gear for a minute. You recently tweeted about simplifying your signal chain. Can you walk through your current pedal board and amp setup?
Yeah. So, okay, to clarify, I've got 3 different pedal boards. One is really big for sessions. One is a little smaller with about 8 pedals on it for local, small non-cartage sessions, live local gigs. Sure. And then when I started doing the Oats tour, I realized that I didn't need a whole lot with him. So I just scaled down, and also we're trying to travel light because we're flying everywhere. Mm-hmm. So if you have a bus, you can put all your gear under the bay and use your own amps and everything. But if you're on an airplane, you're trying to scale down as much as you can, as much as you can. So what I did was I came up with this little bitty board. It's a tuner, an RC booster, a Nobles pedal, a tremolo pedal, and a delay pedal. And I think it's a Boss tuner, an RC booster, vintage Nobles. It's a T-Rex Tremster tremolo, and then the Brigadier Strymon delay, which is great. And
I love T-Rex stuff.
Yeah, great stuff. And I don't use a volume pedal, any of that stuff. I just plug right into the tuner and then out through the delay, and then into for the stuff we did with Oats on the Road, I suggested 2 deluxe reverb reissues. So you got a backup if one breaks down, or if we're in a really small club, I'll use like a Princeton reverb or a Blues Junior, something like that. Any kind of Fender amp with reverb that's decent works. But my home stuff is in Nashville stuff is all vintage blackface Fender amps. I just played a killer Tweed Deluxe style amp yesterday called a Lazy J, which is a really great sounding amp. I might go back and check that thing out tomorrow. But my setup is pretty traditional. A couple overdrives, a little bit of delay here and there. Not the tremolo and delay are only on a few songs.
Yeah.
But basically, if I've got reverb and an overdrive, I'm good.
Yeah, and so have you thought about finding a reverb pedal you really love, and that way you don't have to rely on having that perfect Fender amp waiting for you? Or
yeah, I don't use any reverb pedals. Now the Strymon Flint has reverb on it, but there's another pedal that's making really great reverb, and I can't remember the name of it right now. There's a great reverb pedal, but the name's blanking on me. I try to use amp reverb when I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then my guitars are all stock. Like this is Russ Paul made this Tele. He hand wound these pickups, but this is basically a vintage Tele pickup and a vintage Strat pickup in the neck.
Nice.
So a little bit of a different configuration with the Strat pickup, but still nothing overwound, nothing modded, no active pickups, nothing like that. I use D'Addario Planet Wave cables, no amp mods. Everything is very stock and just right off the chute,
Yeah. Yeah, you talk in your lessons a lot about when you're going for your tone before you get too deep into any pedals. starting right at your guitar and right on your amp.
Yeah,
Getting it dialed in there.
Yeah, just to get a nice bass tone,
Right.
And then because that way, a lot of the times, I've heard guys that have their amp on like 2.5, and their pedals are doing all the work.
Uh-huh.
And to me, that's not going to sound good. To me, I'd say crank a Fender amp up to like 4 or 5 to just get started, and then incorporate your pedals, and they're going to sound great.
Right. So just going back to the reverb thing, is there a tonal kind of reason why you prefer amp reverb over like just a nice reverb pedal?
Yeah, the amp reverb, it just sounds better. There's no way you can take a reverb tank that big and put it in a pedal that big.
Right.
So it just sounds better. I mean, and some reverb on amps sound better than others. If the tank is working well, and that your reverb tubes and everything are intact, and the amp is a good sound working amp, the reverb would be just amazing. And it's just nice. It's the perfect amount. It doesn't go too long. It doesn't go too short. If you bring it up to around 2.5 or 3 on a Fender amp, it's just a beautiful reverb. And then anything else other than that could probably be like a digital reverb or something that's really more like 70s or 80s sounding. But to me, I love the way a Fender reverb sounds.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's see, I would say Natty Bo 1964. Hi Guthrie, just saw you play with John Oates recently. Enjoyed how you mixed many different styles into your performance. The pedal steel licks really stood out. Who are some of your favorite pedal steel players?
Some favorite pedal steels. Well, Ralph Mooney for sure, for really traditional stuff. Paul Franklin, Russ Paul, John Huey, Weldon Myrick, Dan Dugmore, Robbie Turner.
Where would we have heard some of these guys? Like any like just classic records they've been on, or?
Yeah, Lloyd Green, all these guys, Buddy Emmons. So all these guys played on tons of records in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s in Nashville, and still are. Russ Paul and Paul Franklin are still playing on tons of records. Tommy White played at the Opry for years and years. He's fantastic. Curly Chalker. I mean, there's just all these. There's a ton of great steel guitar players, but those are some good names. If you look those guys up, you can find all the records they played on like Wikipedia and stuff.
Right. Paul Franklin was on the John Oates tour with you, right?
He did a couple dates with us. Russ Paul did a couple dates with us.
Okay.
And then Paul Franklin's on my record with on the Vince Gill track.
Right. Nice.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear all that. Okay, so Tim Hilton, his question is, what was your greatest inspiration in your guitar playing journey?
It's hard.
Big question.
Yeah, here's the deal with these questions. So when you say what is your, when you're asking for one thing, it's almost impossible because there's been so many. I mean, every day is inspiring in Nashville because there's so many people here. You got to keep playing. You got to keep, your chops up. You got to stay on the scene. But, and you got to go out and hear people that'll kick your ass. Like if I need to get my ass kicked, I go hear Jack Pearson or Derek Trucks at the Ryman or Pat Burgess down at, playing a jazz gig or something like that. But just getting these phone calls to play with my heroes have been super inspiring. Meeting certain people and them becoming my friends, all that kind of stuff is always super inspiring.
Right. That's good.
There's been a lot of those. I'm a lucky dude.
B. Gober, I think that's how I would say it. Some of these student names are interesting.
I know they are.
It says, I've learned my triad.
Country Jew.
What's that?
I've got one that's Country Jew.
Really?
This guy calls him the Country Jew.
And Barefoot Kenny definitely got our attention earlier.
Yeah.
All right. So I've learned my triad shapes all over the neck. What's the next step in turning these shapes into music?
Yeah. Well, yeah. The next step with that is just visualizing where they go into the next chord. So here, and the relationship between like, here's your G. Your C is right there. little sections. That's a great place right there because you've got your G. There's your C shape right there. So, and then your D is right there. So literally you've got G, C, D, and G right there with those triads. And I hardly have to move. That all stays right there in that relationship, and then you start, you start seeing how close those chords are together, and then you start seeing the puzzle really come together with how those triads work together, and with the scales and those triads, and seeing the relationship of those chords, it can't help but to just click,
Right. That's good. That's good. So let's see. Same student, actually. Another question. He says, I also really enjoy your Memphis style licks. What recordings in this style would you recommend listening to?
Anything by like some of that Dobie Gray stuff. Give Me the Beat Boys, to Free My Soul. That was all Memphis guys. Also anything by who's the girl that did Son of a Preacher Man? I'm blanking on that name. But any of those R&B records, I mean, even, the Memphis stuff is great, but even stuff from Stax and Al Green, any of that R&B and soul stuff that's totally down the same pike as the Memphis stuff. But, God, not so much Elvis, but more like Booker T and the MGs,
right.
Stuff like that. Steve Cropper. Anything by Steve Cropper is huge. Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, all that kind of stuff. And I'm blanking on those names because I'm blanking on one of the best ones, and it's whoever did. The name is on the tip of my tongue. She sang "Son of a Preacher Man." Who is that? That's gonna kill me now. If anybody knows, please chime in on the scoreboard. Oh man, that's killing me. Anyway,
Dusty Springfield.
Dusty Springfield, yes, yeah, Dusty.
It just suddenly came to me. I didn't Google it or anything.
Dusty Springfield, because all that stuff is anything by Reggie Young. If you Google Reggie Young, then all the stuff he played on is all that stuff, man. He invented this. He was the guy that invented this. Those kind of licks. He invented all that stuff. So anything by Reggie Young, you can Google him and it'll tell you all these records that he played on.
Nice.
Really cool stuff.
All right, we only have time for a few more, so I'm going to squeeze as many I can here at the tail end. Another one from Daniel Morris. It says, and it's pretty cool. It looks like he's actually one of our violin students, so that's cool.
Cool.
Says, hello Guthrie, how has the way you practice now evolved since you first arrived in Nashville, doing scales and things, or do you focus more on other stuff? There's a lot of stuff I need to learn for sure, but since I'm working a lot, I don't really worry about I don't learn a lot of stuff that I mean, maybe this sounds weird, but I don't learn a lot of stuff that I don't think I'm going to use, and there's a lot of things that I do need to learn, like I need to study my, half whole diminished scales and all that stuff. But, I don't use that stuff very often. So I end up trying to just make music when I pick up the guitar and just continue to familiarize myself with
different ideas and different things to make music on this instrument. So what I'll do, rather than like quote unquote practicing, I'll just sit down like I'm doing now. And a lot of times what happens is before I do my video exchanges, I'll sit down and get ready to do that, and I'll turn my amp on at a really low volume, nice little bit of reverb, might have a couple effects, might not, and I'll just sit there and start playing, you know, and I'll play a little bit on the front pickup, I'll go to the middle or the back, I'll play a little bit, I'll try to come up with something musical, find different ways to do different voicings up the neck or something with some chords, or maybe try to, you know, tap my foot and play some jazz lines that are in time. So I try to play stuff that's musical rather than just do practice to a metronome or scales or anything like that. And if you're making music and you're playing the guitar, then to me that is practicing, because you're even focusing harder on it, because you know, you're trying to come up with stuff that are actual musical ideas. So that's kind of how I look at practicing now. You know, so that's kind of it. And then sometimes I'll turn delay on and get some ambient effects and really try to get into some stuff like that. Maybe use the Strat with the tremolo a little bit and kind of get into that world. So that's kind of what I'm looking at when I do it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. This one's from our buddy Marcus. It says, you share the stage with many legends. Any tips on giving other players space without sacrificing your signature sound or style within the live performance setting?
Yeah, and man, like I said, so many of these answers are coming back to what I've been thinking about the past couple of years, and being in Nashville has really helped me realize this. But it's all about the song you're playing. So if it's a really kind of slow ballad, if it's something like this, where I'm going, where it's like, it might be a song that goes like, so that's one of John's songs, and that's the part I kind of play on that song. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play some cool kind of ambient stuff around him, and I'm going to play some lines in between his vocals. So I'm going to be listening to him as much as I possibly can, and almost not listening to myself. And as soon as I find a hole that I think is appropriate in between his vocal phrasing, then I might play a little something. And then I might wait a couple bars and I might find another little spot, or I might let him have a couple finger picking spots, or if we're playing with a keyboard player or Sam Bush or somebody, or a steel guitar, I'm really going to cut what I'm doing in half.
I'm trying to find out. My apologies if there's any technical difficulties going on.
Unless he gives me full reign to kind of just go crazy, which he does, and then I'll go crazy. But it's all within the confines of the song and what the singer's phrasing is.
Nice. Okay, great. I lost you there for a second, but I got the most of that.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So we got time for just one or two more. Let's see. I know you have the chord shapes. Okay, so this one's from Bluesbone 007.
Okay.
Clay King here. I know you have the chord shapes and forms nailed, but how do you approach creating hooks for tunes you are recording? How do you sound musical and not just like you're licking?
Well, yeah, I think going back to the foundation of that would be just knowing your instrument well enough to be able to come up with some ideas that are your own, you know, and that comes from, like I said, you know, knowing your instrument really well, having your own style, and putting the time in to really learn from a lot of different influences. So, you know, and listening to a lot of records and kind of knowing and hearing what other guys do, and just being, you got to be a really good musician, and you got to be able to hear what kind of part is gonna take that song and make it better, or if not, you know, don't put it in there. So that's kind of a tricky question, but you know, that's the reason why there's only so many guys playing on big records, because that's a hard thing to do. That's a really hidden talent. I mean, being able to hear this stuff and come up with something that's like a great part. Yeah, it's tricky, man. You really got to be on top of it, but you also have to know your instrument so well that you're way beyond just playing licks. You're actually coming up with something that's inventive, with a great tone and a great feel, and it just, all that stuff just comes into being a really, becoming a better musician, and having a lot of experience under your belt to where you can kind of come up with this stuff. It's not easy.
Right. Oh, that's great. I think that's maybe a good note. We still have some of these questions we didn't get a chance to get to. I think that might be a nice place to end.
Okay.
But I will just end with one more question of my own here. It's something I like to ask everybody that I do one of these with. You mentioned a couple different times throughout this conversation that there's still a lot you have left to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's cool and important for our students to remember that all of our instructors, as amazing as they may be and everything they've accomplished, they're still students themselves, and they're still practicing, and they still have goals. So what would you say if you had any musical goals for yourself over the next 3-5 years from now? If you could look into the future, what's something you would have hoped you would have learned or accomplished by then?
Man, that's a good one. Yeah, first of all, yes, anybody that is in this for the right reasons, we are gonna keep learning as long as we live. Absolutely. There is no mastering these instruments. There's so much territory that you can cover. And yeah, that's one of the reasons I love living in Nashville, because I can learn from people for the rest of my life. There's a train getting ready to go by here, but I just want to keep becoming a better musician. I want to keep writing tunes. And of course, I want to be able to hone in on deep pocket, deep groove, really good rhythm guitar playing. Always trying to improve my tone. The musicians that I work with, I want to keep expanding those relationships and those pools, and the artists that I get to work with. Yeah, I mean, just all that stuff. I just want to keep doing what I'm doing and keep it growing.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. Thanks so much. Thanks for your time today and sharing some of your knowledge with us. It's really cool. Thanks so much to the students for asking such great questions. I always like being able to pull from all the students. Some of it gets real technical music theory. Some of it's really just kind of talking about gear, setup, what records should I be listening to?
Yeah.
It was a nice mix of questions. So thanks for everyone's participation. I'll see you guys all next month. We'll be announcing who that interview will be with soon. And again, thanks, Guthrie. You're the man. It's been great.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
So our winner is going to be Martin B. Schwab. So our customer service department's going to be reaching out to you and giving you a free little gift. So thanks again, Guthrie. Students, we'll see you all next month.
Later on, y'all.